Let's check out our recent post by Word Radio about Alyssa Grenfell, who, by the way, lives rent-free in those guys' heads.
I think a lot of times reality TV feels very exploitative, and I also feel like it's meant to manipulate our emotions to feel a certain way towards certain characters.
Interesting.
I'm turning this back on you. Are you a producer of a reality show of Mormons? All of my friends are stars in this show that you are producing. Everybody that I love. You are manipulating your audience emotions with your producing to make them feel a certain way towards our character, towards our religion. We can easily take your quote, Alyssa, and plug in the word religion. Producers mean to manipulate our emotions and to make us feel a certain way towards a certain religion. So thank you for exposing yourself, Alyssa, as the producer of your reality social media war against Mormons.
Now, I'm going to respond to that video in a second, but first let me give you some background on Alyssa Grenfell. Alyssa Grenfell is a former member of the LDS Church, raised in a devout Mormon family and deeply involved in Mormon practices, including serving a mission and attending BYU. After leaving the church, she moved to New York City and began a new chapter, distancing herself from her former faith. Currently, she shares her experiences and perspectives on Mormonism, offering guidance to those facing similar transitions, and has published a book about leaving the church and rebuilding life afterward. I compiled a complete anthology of Alyssa Grenfell's TikTok content, over 300 videos and almost 10 hours of content. I watched every single one of her videos to put that compilation together, so I'm pretty familiar with what I call Ex-Mormonism's brightest star. No one explains basic LDS concepts, theology, and history to non-Mormons better than Ms. Grenfell. That's why her channel gets over 7 million views a month. That's impressive. And I know I'm supposed to be responding to the Word Radio video here, but just give me a second. I just want to get a couple of things out of the way. I've noted a few minor disagreements that I've had with Alyssa's content over the years, including her post about Mormon face, which I thought was insensitive.
Have you ever wondered why certain people look Mormon? I see this all over social media where certain content creators get tons of comments saying you look very Mormon. Mormons really only marry other Mormons. You can't marry in a Mormon temple unless it's two Mormons getting married. This, in large part, has made it so that the gene pool is actually very small, and especially in a place like Utah, where Mormons fled and went to Utah to be able to practice polygamy in peace. Those Mormons were only making babies with other Mormons for a very long time, and the only opportunity to make the gene pool a little larger is to convert people. I think another reason for this is not just the way Mormons look, but it's also the Mormon vibe, which is often super hyper friendly, almost too friendly. Mormons are taught to proselytize and share their religion. I think that Mormon culture is very copycat.
That's definitely not her best moment. And she also had a controversial take on inbreeding.
Alyssa took that vid down, but someone saved it.
Have you ever wondered why Mormons in Utah all seem to look alike? Mormons really only marry other Mormons, which means they only aren't making babies with Mormons. And for a very long time, Utah was a completely isolated state, because when the Mormons first arrived in Utah, they kicked out the Native Americans, and they made sure they were very far away from the prying eye of the federal government. My family has been Mormon for many generations, and my first ancestor to join the church, Sanford Porter, was one of the first 200 people to join the religion at the time of Joseph Smith in 1831. I recently took a genetic test, and the genetic test was able to actually tell me that I have Mormonism in my genes. If I look back, I can also see that I have first cousin Mormons who married each other not very many generations ago. And so if some people have Mormon faces, like me, it's because genetically they actually have Mormon DNA. I also think that Utah Mormon women live in a very high pressure environment. The Google search term boob job has the highest search volume in Utah. The same thing goes for extensions. Of all the 50 states in the United States, Utah has the highest search volume of any of them for extensions. 14% of Mormon women say that they've had major cosmetic surgery, and 20% of Mormon women say that they've had some sort of cosmetic enhancement. And so if you're a Mormon woman in Utah, even if you don't have a Mormon face, you may very well try to buy a Mormon face.
That's definitely not how I would have phrased it. And also Alyssa had some controversial takes on LDS funerals.
I knew Ballerina Farm was Mormon, but this reel I found on Instagram has to be the strangest modern Mormon artifact I've ever seen. First, this reel is about her father's funeral, so it's already to me kind of wild to make a reel for your father's funeral. You'll also see here that she's showing that her father is clothed in the Mormon endowment clothing, which is also used as burial clothing. But showing it online, I would think is considered pretty sacrilegious and something I get a lot of hate for, but I guess if you're an active member, it is okay. Also, as you watch the reel, you'll see this flower company come up quite a bit throughout the reel, which apparently is her late father's flower company. This ad feels more like an ad than it does a way to honor the father's legacy. Their smiles are huge, which I know Mormons would say is because they're excited to see this loved one in the afterlife. Well, you would think that would translate into some kind of calm sense of peace, and not huge social media smiles like they're at a wedding.
That's just not a place I'm willing to go. Additionally, there's been a few scientific or historical inaccuracies in her videos, which I don't think we need to quibble about, because I'm in agreement with the vast majority of what Alyssa has put out. Now let's get back to that Ward Radio clip.
Alyssa Grenfell treats my religion and my friends like utter garbage.
Now, the Ward Radio cheerleader we're listening to here is Sister Charlotte Barnes. The issue here isn't that Alyssa Grenfell criticizes the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and treats Mormons like garbage. It's that church leaders themselves have treated its own members poorly. Take, for example, the 2023 Securities and Exchange fine, where LDS leaders illicitly concealed hundreds of billions of dollars. All the while, ordinary Latter-day Saints were urged to keep donating to what they thought was a sacred cause. This generational deception disrespects member sacrifices and erodes trust. Senior church leaders treated its own members and the totality of humanity at large poorly by not using these sacred funds in any verifiable way except to build a mall and bail out an insurance company. That's not Alyssa's fault. And the church's continued refusal to mandate background checks for its leaders who work with children in so many locations is another example of neglecting basic safety measures, which puts vulnerable members, especially women and girls, at high risk. Additionally, church policies have allowed perpetrators and sexual predators continued access to children within congregations due to a misguided doctrine of atonement and forgiveness, further compromising member safety. And how about this stake president in Pennsylvania who refused to report a credible instance of sexual abuse to the police as mandated by law, for which he was charged with a felony for non-reporting? And guess what? The church took the stake president's side. Some might say that these are examples of the church treating its own members like garbage, but I try to avoid hyperbolic rhetoric. Historically, there was also the 150-year temple and priesthood ban for black members of the church, during which time Black Latter-day Saints were treated as second-class saints. Charlotte, did the church treat its black members like garbage for over 150 years? And let's not forget the ongoing struggle of LGBTQ students at BYU campuses, in which the church shows a persistent lack of acceptance for consensual, innocuous same-sex activities like holding hands. All the while, trans members face hostility within the church. Talk about treating people poorly. And what about when the church at its BYU campuses restricts the academic freedom of its faculty and staff members from engaging in critical thinking? This fundamentally disrespects their intellectual autonomy. This kind of thought policing stifles dissent, a hallmark of the church's desire for control, and it fundamentally disregards the dignity of its employees. And in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, women are treated as second-class saints, having no authority, and they must defer to men for every final decision. Charlotte, when you have to look to a man for every spiritual need in your life, is that an example of the church treating you like garbage? Let me know. And let's not forget the Mormon Church's political activities, including filing amicus briefs for anti-LGBTQ causes, and spending millions or even tens of millions of dollars annually to promote restrictive, outdated beliefs, and impose the church's bigoted views on the US and the world at large. This misguided approach disregards others' rights and perspectives, treating those who don't drink the Mormon Kool-Aid dismissively. And the LDS Church has a long history of trying to conceal its past, and continues to do so even to this day. Charlotte, that's not how you treat people with respect, by hiding vital information from them. And let's quickly walk back through Mormon history where notable Mormon figures have disrespected church members and their communities at large. Joseph Smith engaged in illegal treasure hunts and defrauded his neighbors by pretending to be able to see lost objects at a distance. Later, he revised his fantastical stories to make them seem more plausible and divinely sanctioned. Joseph pressured young girls into having intimate relationships with him, which is a serious violation of trust and ethically disgusting. Sister Barnes, did Joseph Smith treat Fanny Alger, Nancy Rigdon, and his own wife Emma like garbage? And Brigham Young also treated Latter-day Saints with a high level of disregard, such as when he endorsed the horrific idea that interracial couples should be put to death on the spot. Charlotte, did Brigham Young treat interracial couples like garbage when he said that they should be executed with a javelin? Let me give you a couple more examples in Mormon church history. LDS prophet Lorenzo Snow's marriage to Sarah Minnie Jensen when he was 57 and she was 16, along with their confirmed sexual relationship, adds to the troubling history of church leaders' immoral behavior. Charlotte, did Mormon leaders like Brigham Young and Lorenzo Snow, who impregnated teenage girls through manipulative polygamous unions, treat those girls like garbage? And Wilford Woodruff and Joseph F. Smith repeatedly lied to the church membership about the cessation of polygamy, further treating the church's own members and the federal government with disrespect by concealing the truth. Sister Barnes, when dozens of Mormon leaders repeatedly lied to the members and the federal government about stopping polygamy, who did they treat like garbage? Many more examples could be multiplied here, but I know that word radio blind sheep have a limited attention span, so we got to keep things moving. Let's get back to word radio, in which these LDS shock jock commentators engage in highly offensive rhetoric, at times calling other people Nazis, conspiracy theorists, anti-Semites, or worse. Here's a couple of examples. First, Cardin compares me to a Hamas terrorist.
And that's literally just spiritual terrorism. It's no different than in the war of ideas, building your headquarters underneath the hospital. That's why these people do it, okay? That's why Hamas has their headquarters underneath a hospital, because they're not overt equal contenders on a battlefield of ideas.
Talk about treating somebody like garbage. And he's compared Mormons to Hitler.
Anti-Mormons never, ever refute scripture. They only fulfill it. And I love the scripture that says, for when they are learned, they think they are wise. They've only read some of the anti-Mormon ones that have a thin veneer of academia, but lack the verifiability thereof. And then they think that's overwhelming evidence. At its time, I'm sure Mein Kampf seemed like an overwhelming evidence that the Jews were bad people. That doesn't mean that they were right.
Charlotte, who is he treating like garbage now? And next up is when Cardin compared me to a neo-Nazi.
Imagine if the ADL were to ask somebody in a chat, will you denounce that like the world domination theory of Jews or whatever is not correct? And like a neo-Nazi literally just said like, oh yeah, of course I'll denounce it. Well, most aren't part of the big banking conspiracy.
That's honestly disgraceful, but I guess, Charlotte, you got no issues, right?
She just doesn't care.
And Cardin also said that ex-Mormons are bugs who need to be exterminated.
If somebody's stung by a bee, what's the first thing you have to do? Get rid of the stinger, right? If somebody's been stung by a false narrative bee, first aid is to immediately remove the stinger in the proper fashion. You can't just squeeze it or else more venom goes in. You're actually supposed to use a credit card or your fingernail to swipe it away so less venom goes in. And I think that we have online a swarm of just bad anti-Mormon, anti-Christian, anti-spiritual bees. And they're stinging people.
Who's treating whom like garbage now? But folks, Sister Barnes doesn't condemn any of this rhetoric. She condones it. She embraces it. She loves it. She smiles sweetly while these sleazy attacks drag people through the mud. But then, get this, she's going to try to lecture us about civility in public discourse. I don't think so.
No, that's not going to happen.
You know, when I joined the Ward Radio chat once, I was repeatedly attacked with ad hominem insults, rather than any sort of welcome, even though I was a premium channel member at the time. I was essentially treated with complete disrespect. Dare I say, garbage. And Charlotte, here's what your deluded brain can't possibly understand. Alyssa doesn't resort to ad hominem attacks, which is a significant difference between her mostly enlightened rhetoric and the nasty insults that you and your latchkeys trade in. If you only get one thing out of this video, Barnes, listen up. Allow me to give you the further light and knowledge that the Father promised to send but never did. Come closer. Criticizing a system of religion is not the same as treating its adherents poorly. Did you get that? Because that's what you and the Word Radio sycophants can't quite understand. The irony here is that the Midnight Mormon commentators don't consider critiquing other systems of religion as hateful. Yet when their own private club is questioned, they label it immediately as offensive. Give me a f***ing break. See, there's this cultural assumption that religion should be above critique, and that challenging one's metaphysical notions equates to treating people poorly. But faith, just like any other worldview, deserves critical evaluation. Alyssa, for her part, tends to approach these critiques with respect, something I think we can all learn from, myself included. Let's play a part of that clip one more time.
Thank you for exposing yourself, Alyssa, as the producer of your reality social media war against Mormons.
War against Mormons.
See, there's a fundamental difference between a war on Mormons and a war on Mormonism. It's such an important distinction, and it's too bad that understanding distinctions isn't Charlotte's strong point. Sadly, there is a small cohort of ne'er-do-wells who wish Latter-day Saints harm. These reprehensible criminals vandalize chapels, assault missionaries, and have even killed some members. I know firsthand about these lunatics when a couple of people pulled guns on me when I served a mission full-time for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. These vile actions by the very few people who hate Latter-day Saints are to be soundly condemned. But this condemnable behavior has nothing whatsoever to do with most critics of the church like Alyssa Grenfell, whose channel is devoted to criticizing a faith, not its adherents. Alyssa Grenfell's critiques are reactions to the poor treatment of the institutional church to its own members, not an attack on members themselves. See, Alyssa doesn't engage in ad hominem attacks. That's the difference between her and Board Radio. They do. And they level these nasty insults with sanctimonious pride. They decry the idea of being nice, instead throwing mud and hurling insults. And deep down, the supporters of Ward Radio must understand the hypocrisy here. These right-wing Latter-day Saints don't subscribe to Hinduism, and if asked about that faith, they would likely criticize it. See, criticizing a system of religion does not equate to treating its followers with disrespect. It simply means that one doesn't align with that particular worldview. And it's an unfortunate reality that in our culture, there's often an assumption that religion should be untouchable and above criticism. And as we've seen from the Ward Radio reaction video, when someone challenges religious belief, they're immediately labeled as rude, nasty, or as treating people like garbage.
Alyssa Grenfell treats my religion and my friends like utter garbage.
If there's something reprehensible that Alyssa has said in her videos, it should be easy enough to find and queue up, considering the amount of content that she's released.
War against Mormons.
War against Mormons.
I'm embarrassed for Sister Barnes. Listen up, Charlotte. You need to do better.
Do better.
See, Charlotte's muddled brain won't allow her to even think about the dichotomy of senior LDS church leaders treating its own members like garbage because she's made a quasi-Masonic oath not to do so. Instead of calling a spade, Charlotte instead lashes out into the ether at literally nothing. Instead, Charlotte wants to play her favorite card, the victim card. Her laughable persecution complex runs deep into her sanctimonious soul. Oh no, someone has criticized her beloved pet club. Therefore, Barnes thinks that that person is human garbage. What a joke. Charlotte, I will dismiss you without further argument.